Hi, Dr. Zach.
Hello, I'm also glad to be with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, of course. Such a good way to end up with a tumultuous week of American history on a good, strong note here.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I think this is such a beautiful way to end our week, but start our weekend. And I love your background. Where are you? You look like you're in a tropical.
I am. I'm in Oahu, Hawaii.
Oh, we thought maybe you were because we saw some pictures that Jen had posted. I'm like, God, it looks like Hawaii. Well, we all wish we were there too, but we are connected now, so we're kind of there. And I'm not sure if you heard, I gave a very brief bio and introduction into who you are and what you do, but it barely scratches the surface. I don't want to cut into too much of our time here because we really have like pages of questions, and you are just someone who's been a personal hero of mine, but also a personal hero of hundreds of thousands of millions. So first and foremost, thank you for everything that you do. Truly, you're helping us heal each and every one of us. So thank you. I really honor that. And I would love for you to, anything that I didn't share in the bio, if you'd like to just introduce and say hello to this, I don't know, 1,200, 1,300 people that have been waiting for you to say something. And they're going to tell me to stop talking in a second.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for all 1,300 of you. What I am that gets missed in any introduction is just a very young human. I'm just, I feel like a kid every single day. I wake up on my pillow, and my favorite moment is when you haven't moved yet and you've just started to come into consciousness that another day is here. And it just experiencing my head on a pillow in the morning and in the dusky kind of light of pre-dawn, experiencing just being present and being alive, and so grateful for that experience. And that continues to define each of my days recently, of just this awesome experience of being a 5-year-old that hasn't had to go into school yet and be overwhelmed by peer pressure or pure judgment or observation of separateness that happens when we get into the school years. I feel like I'm starting to live life in that preschool state of I love being human. I'm so glad to play with the humans that I get to play with every day. And for that, I'm just so glad to play with all 1,300 of you for the next hour. And just if we lose touch of that childlike aspect of ourselves, we will lose touch of the magic of being alive and the miracle of being human.
Yeah, no, that's such a beautiful sentiment and such a great reminder. Thank you so much for that. I would say that I wake up every day, that first moment, like what you said, I'm just like, you're so happy. You're just like, it's amazing. And you're right. Then you start going into your day and you lose sight of that sometimes. And so it's just such a beautiful reminder. Thank you for that. Thank you. So, yes, Vicki, we will definitely save this live. We save all the lives. I'll go into that towards the very end. But we would just love to dive into a few things, Dr. Zach, if you don't mind. There's so many things. Obviously, we connected to our audience. Dr. Zach and I connected because I use this product, and I'm going to let him share with you about this in just a minute. It's something that I use every day. ION BIOME Gut Health. This is actually Dr. Zach's creation and his product, and I recommend it to all my clients. So we first connected because it's just yet another tool that he's created to help us and help our planet. So Dr. Zach, would you mind just talking about that for just a minute? Or 5 minutes?
I think, for the world, that looks like a dietary supplement product. For me, that looks like the most disruptive thing that's ever happened to me. The liquid within that bottle transformed my entire scientific understanding of human life, of planetary life ultimately, and has really disrupted, what was 17 years of medical education and specialty that I did in the academic environment. Was pretty much had to be thrown out the window and start back from ground zero in the soils of the world. to wrap my head around what Mother Earth was trying to teach us through that liquid supplement. And so the path towards that discovery and experience, and it wasn't a discovery. I make it sound like I discovered something. I was witness to something beautiful, and it was something of nature. And what I became witness to was that deeper than the plants that have for thousands of years been recognized to be our medicine. And so from Hippocrates 2,000 years ago to 4,000, 5,000 years ago, Chinese medicine saying, let that food be that medicine. Suddenly in 2012, and by this time I had left academia, 2 years running my own nutrition center for reversing chronic disease in one of the most impoverished areas of the country in rural Southern Virginia. And in that impoverished area, looking for food solutions, finding that the food was lacking. The food had lost its medicinal quality, and it wasn't healing my patients as it should have decades previous. And in that journey, it took us into the soil, and we started to learn what was missing and what was present in the soil that had never been there before. And what was missing was the building blocks for proteins, these amino acids. And what was present that had never been there before were the chemicals that were creating that depletion. And the chemicals were herbicides and pesticides that were brand new to the food system as of the 1970s in small amounts, but really in the 1990s is when things really broke loose. So we're talking about recent history. We've been here 200,000 years, and just in the last 20, we suddenly did this. We extracted from the soil nutrient density and the building blocks for life, which are these amino acids. And in that process, as we dove into soil science, we discovered that there was a communication network in the soil, which was dumbfounding to me. And so that's where we started a biotech lab, started in my tiny little clinic. Our first lab was literally a closet. We had like $400 of equipment. And ultimately, one of my good colleagues that helped me, kind of discover this whole line of thinking around medicine within the soil, would help get $10,000 for us to build our first little production plant. And we were making these white bottles. We had no label, we had no marketing team, so I just had a Sharpie marker, and I would take 1 tablespoon 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of it. And previous to that, I had consumed an enormous amount of that stuff personally, and had done it orally and intravenously. We were trying everything to try to understand the power of this stuff.
You use this intravenously as well?
I have. It turns out it doesn't work that well intravenously. It doesn't do any harm, but it just doesn't work as well. And so I took liters of that intravenously to some benefit, but it was really in getting that stuff touching my microbiome, the real organic garden of my gut, where things really started to change. And when we started putting this into our patients, it radically changed our whole concept, because I was still in my pharmaceutical mindset that I was trying to find a cure to something.
Right.
And instead of a cure, what we found was that the body has an innate capacity to heal.
Yes.
And so we don't need a cure. We actually don't need a medicine. We have the innate capacity to heal within us. And so what we uncovered accidentally was the realization that the microbiome within the soils beneath our feet and the soils of our gut have the capacity to produce the communication network to coordinate our endogenous, our innate capacity for health and healing that's within us. And so that was the paradigm shift that really made obsolete 17 years of medical training and the rest, because suddenly you didn't need a doctor, you needed Mother Nature. And if we could reintegrate humanity back into that nature, we could eliminate not only the chronic disease epidemics that we are now about to go extinct from, we could actually realize a state of health that humanity has never experienced. Because even in the indigenous peoples of the past, there was a lack of understanding of our role within this microecosystem, within the microbiome, within plant life and all of this. And so even thousands of years back in Chinese medicine and the rest, we were still already in the pharmaceutical mindset of we need a treatment for this disease.
Right.
The idea that direct connection to our system of communication of nature could prevent disease was something that even was lacking at that time. So we're talking about a radical revolution in science that's occurring. And it's cool that the soil, and such a humble thing as the soil itself, would be the harbinger of this kind of truth.
Yeah, so how did you, and I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like, how did you, what made you think to look to the soil? As you said, you had almost 20 years of a different type of training and research and mentality. And I know that what made you think let's look at the dirt? Um,
Yeah, it started, the question came up because the food was failing.
right.
And so what I was doing is I was practicing a plant-based medicine approach. And so I was, basing my work on Colin Campbell and Essel Steve from Cleveland Clinic, and all these guys for 40 years had developed a massive amount of science, massive amount of clinical data, as well as basic science data showing us that we could heal any chronic disease with food. So I set out to do this, and my personality is a little dangerous in that I'm always kind of the go very big or go home kind of personality. And so in that go big philosophy, I was making my patients, juice literally pounds of kale and cruciferous vegetables, and with the expectation that I could heal anything with this. I felt empowered, just as I had in those heady first few years of being a doctor, equipped with the multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical toolbox. I felt invincible as a doctor. And then after a couple of years of finding out that I was only putting patch jobs on my patients, and they would come back 3 months, 6 months later in a worse shape than they had been when they first threw the pharmaceutical toolbox at them, that started the slippery slope and realizing I had the wrong toolbox. And it started to feel that same way with food, where I was throwing all of this food at my patients, and some of them would miraculously get better. Diabetes would evaporate, their cancer would resolve, whatever it was. But there was a significant number, and when I say significant, like 30-40% of those patients were actually getting worse on the best health food I could provide them. Inflammation markers literally increasing, bloating, brain fog, pain in the joints. Like, it was like horrific for them to go on something as simple as kale. Yeah. And so that was the journey into asking those deeper questions of what happened to the kale, what was different from Colin Campbell's cruciferous vegetables in the 1980s compared to mine today. Yeah. And so that took us into the soil.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. I didn't know that part of the story, so thank you for sharing that. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so drawn, everyone, is to what you've been teaching, what you've been sharing, is because I truly believe, not just in my journey and my own practice, that we are incredible healing machines. And it's just that reminder that we have to give people right now, especially during this time and during this year with this pandemic and the virus, that we really have an intuitive ability to heal ourselves, and it's having those tools. And so there's something that you had talked about the viruses and this difference between the virome, and the microbiome. And there are many questions about that. People didn't really understand what that meant, and I was wondering if you could dive into that to really give a better explanation of the distinction and why the virome is important, obviously. And some people know what the microbiome is, but there's still a lot of people that would love your explanation.
Yeah, I would say there's actually, even among physicians and scientists, we're still confused about what the microbiome is. And we tend to think we know what it is, and then we unfortunately attribute all of the characteristics of bacteria onto fungi and viruses and the like. And that's a huge mistake. And scientifically, that's a grave mistake. But what just happened is we just shut down a global economy out of our confusion of the microbiome. And so I suddenly realized a couple months ago that, man, we really need to start teaching the virome. The microbiome, people are starting to understand that maybe there's such a thing as good bacteria in an ecosystem and all that. But that we could vilify a virus to the fact that we would create so much fear that we would paralyze an entire international, global economy to the failure of, bankruptcy of hundreds of millions of families around the world now in desperate poverty, worsening their situation based on some abstract fear of a virus. And so this is where, the tenor of my communication and education really shifted. And I realized I had done a disservice by not really focusing the last 10 years of my education to the public on the virome. And so what is the virome? The virome is a description of the genomic stew, if you will, that sits around us and flies around us. And so the genome of all of the organisms on the planet, and organisms meaning living things. And so living bacteria, living plants, living animals, humans, the whole spectrum there, that are an extraordinary library of genes. Okay, so we have massive genetic code. Humans only have 20,000 genes, so we're very tiny genetically. A fruit fly has 13,000 genes, and a flea has 30,000 genes. So you fit right between a flea and a fruit fly, and so you're almost as good as a flea genetically. And so in comparison, when we start to look at the microbiome, which are living organisms, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, parasites, and the like, the microbiome has a massive genomic library. And the bacteria, for example, of the 40,000 or so species that we map out, you're already at 2 million genes. Then if you look at the parasites at 300,000 species, that represents 2 billion genes. And then when you look at the fungi, 3.5 million species, 125 trillion genes compared to our 20,000 genes. And so 20,000 versus 125 trillion is a very tiny number. And so it turns out that in the genetic environment of the planet Earth, we are almost invisible. And what really is teeming on the planet Earth is the communication of all of these genomes of living organisms. And the way in which we communicate is a couple fold. We can actually communicate through something called horizontal gene transfer, which is where two cells that butt up next to each other can exchange information. And bacteria do this very, very well. It started with something called archaea, which are the most ancient bacterial thing that's developed on Earth about 4 billion years ago. The archaea could swap genetic information all the time back and forth between each other. And anytime there was a new innovation genetically, that could be passed on to each other. And today, 4 billion years later, this still happens every day. It happens in a farm in the form of weed tolerance. And so if you spray a chemical on a field over and over again, a few weeds are going to find a genetic loophole or a gain of function that allows them to escape the toxicity of the chemical. And they will put that genetic information out to the whole field through horizontal gene transfer, and suddenly the whole field is resistant to the chemical you're spraying. The same thing happens in an ICU. When you get a microorganism or a bacteria that's resistant to the antibiotic you're using, it can suddenly horizontally gene transfer that to all the other organisms. Suddenly your whole ICU is full of drug-resistant bacteria. Right. So that's how it's done on the small scale. The innovation that happened in bacteria 3 billion years ago was that of the viruses. The viruses was a new way to communicate. Viruses are not microorganisms. The word organism means living being. That means they can reproduce, they can produce fuel, they have metabolites that can be broken down into communication. Those are living organisms. And the viruses don't fit into that category. They actually are just the genetic transfer device of all of life of Earth. And so we have actually, in this coronavirus scare, vilified the language of life. That's all the viruses are. And we have created a multi-trillion-dollar disaster out of the fear of the language of the life on Earth. And what is the Earth saying right now? The Earth is saying that it is stressed. In fact, Earth and its organisms are stressed to the point of extinction. Yeah. And the more stress you put on an organism, the more it needs to create the opportunity for diversity, the opportunity for adaptation. And it does that through the viruses. So when we see more and more and more viruses going pandemic, it means that the stress of planet Earth is under more and more and more severe pressure.
Wow. I mean, it's just, and you guys, I know there's a lot of information just now, and we definitely will save all this, but definitely send hearts if you understand. I know I'm getting a lot of comments. I'm sure people have some questions about that, but that was such a great explanation, so that people have a better understanding, and that can hopefully reduce some of that fear and confusion that is just percolating everywhere. And as we talk about what's happening with our Earth, can we talk some more about some of your projects and, your farmer's footprint? And there's a mission that you had started with that, but it's somewhat evolved in this process. And if you could share with us, that would be beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah. So, as we, in the creation of ION and starting to work with soil science, around the world, we started to realize that, this dietary supplement, as miraculous as it's been to work around, to watch humans be able to heal themselves when empowered by a communication network, we started to realize that there was a problem in that. There was a fatal flaw of the solution. which was that if we make humans healthy in their current behavior, we go extinct faster. If we make humans healthy right now and they reproduce faster and they live longer, they will destroy the planet faster because our entire way of life is destructive and consumptive.
Yes.
And so it was a terrifying moment as a physician and scientist who just uncovered one of the most profound truths that I would feel in my entire life, to find out that I had just created a more potent destructive force for the planet through the realization that we can make humans more healthy. And so immediately we realized we were going to need to take all of the income from that and start to put it into root cause solutions for human lifestyle. We needed to start to create solutions for the way in which humans interacted with our nature, such that when we make them healthy, they don't destroy the very fabric of the planet that we depend upon. Right. And so we have been trying to creatively think as a group, what do we need to create for humanity to simply be in a different relationship to Mother Nature? Mm-hmm. And certainly Farmer's Footprint was one of the iterations of that. We realized that if we don't teach farmers how to transition to a biologic regenerative process and away from small molecule chemical pharmaceutical practice of food, then we're going to see the collapse of humankind no matter what we do. So Farmer's Footprint was a campaign of awareness and education to consumers and farmers alike to say we need a revolution instantly in this agricultural space, which is currently killing the planet faster than any other technology on Earth. And so that was one of the steps. But we've created more, and we would love for you all to join the narrative of Farmer's Footprint, because every week or two, you're going to get a deeper and deeper story about a farmer who's making this revolution happen. And it is so inspiring. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity to be in a different relationship to Mother Nature. And so the awareness campaign isn't just about the toxicity we're creating in our neighborhoods and farms. It's about what's being done as the solution, and who can we come alongside as consumers to amplify and speed their recovery or their success ultimately. And so Farmer's Footprint is going to start to expose you those farmer stories. And we created the first little docuseries and realized we needed more bite-sized pieces so we could tell more stories faster. And so we created the farm stories that you now see on Farmer's Footprint. Yes. And it's such an exciting thing to meet the farmers and to see their resilience and to see their joy and their spiritual reconnection to land as they move from chemical to regenerative ag. It changes them as human beings. And that's more inspiring than saying, eat your broccoli. You're seeing a human being be on purpose. You're seeing a human being ignited by a spiritual relationship to their land and to their purpose as a food producer. And so take that journey with us, and we would love your support there to get that message out broader. But I also want to reassure you that we don't expect it to stop there. So one of our innovations that we're pouring our efforts into is a reinvention of the internet. We're creating a safe space online where human interaction cannot be commoditized. Mm-hmm. We feel that Google and Facebook were really the demise of the internet. That was when the internet was completely manifested into a machine of destruction and consumption. And so until we re-engineer the internet, which is, I think, the single biggest manipulator to human behavior, we can't actually escape our own extinction. And so we've been, for 5 years, been building a platform that we believe is the next iteration of the way in which humans can interact online. And we're doing it at the individual level, and then allowing you to have a private space where you have a safe space to explore your ingenuity and creativity without anybody else seeing what you're doing. So that you create a safe space for thought where you can't be exploited by advertisers. As soon as you type something into Google right now, that's being sold to an advertiser.
Yeah.
And so your curiosity is being exploited instantly, and that lowers the vibration of your very curiosity. And because what comes back from Google is not an organic search. It's actually a paid for advertisement string that shows up. And so you're being manipulated at your point of curiosity. So we solved for that. So now when you do a search within this platform, your identity is protected against the advertiser, and your curiosity can start to be something other than an advertising screen. And so we're excited to just create that space. But what we've been building beyond that is something akin to the mycelium network. And we're very excited to connect human beings without the manipulation. And so right now, if you reach out through Facebook or something like that for an old high school friend, the moment you connect, you've been commoditized, and that relationship is now a commodity. We see the opportunity to elevate the vibration of human relationship instead of reduce it by eliminating third parties from seeing relationship occur. And so now we have an AI system that is working with the primary goal of connecting humans over shared purpose. And so the AI system is connecting people just like a mycelial network to see what do they need, what resources are needed over here, what resources exist over here that can be moved over there. And so we're building a mycelial network for humanity so that it's a proactive internet. It's not something that's just waiting to exploit you. It's a proactive platform to invigorate you to do your creative work, whether it be the projects at your workplace, the projects within your home, within your child rearing, within the education of yourself or your children, within your hobbies. Each of these become projects that are empowered by an environment around that. And that, of course, gives us the opportunity to build a new economy. And so we're building a new economic platform within there where we can start to exchange value of human resources and human exchange of thought and co-creation through a non-fiat currency. A fiat currency means there's no backing to it. It's just backed by a military and some sort of energy oil-backed, system. A non-fiat currency that is based in soil rather than oil is our innovation. And so we're building a coin that is backed by soil assets. So every coin that's purchases land around the earth to help save and regenerate soil, water, and air systems. So that every dollar that we use to exchange value, if we go build a company within the space through this economic exchange, we can actually build Mother Earth's tenacity and regenerative capacity. And when you have a soil rather than oil-backed economy, your asset that backs the currency is always growing. Through regenerative practices, we can grow the amount of soil that's even on an acre of land. And so in 10 years, the very thing backing the currency will grow. If it's an oil-backed economy, we only extract, we only lessen the volume of the resource that backs the economy. And so a military that backs an oil-based economy, as the U.S. does, is an extractive and destructive force. And so this is the way in which we are trying to, at every level of education, communication, innovation, business development, technological advancement, look to nature for the template. And that's what we're trying to do as a company. And that's what we hope that everybody has the opportunity to do is in this space, you become an organic creative workforce. And that's what we're excited to see. So we launched that in 2021 and we're pretty damn excited.
Wow. I mean, that is just brilliant. And I mean, I don't even have words to express. That's so brilliant and so needed. And thank you for creating this. So we had so many questions about when you said 2021. How can people sign up now to be a part of it? They go to your website. They go to Seraphic. Where should they go? Where's the best place for people to go so that they know how they're going to support Farmers Footprint, right? And then also they can be a part of this platform as soon as it is launched. Would you just be
so the Access MD newsletter will keep you abreast of everything we're doing. It gets exhaustive to listen to all the stuff that's going on at Seraphic and beyond, but we've got a big impact investment fund that we're launching to engineer the future of regenerative agriculture faster. And so that's a huge one. So that's where family foundations and family funds can align with us to accelerate that, as well as sovereign wealth funds and all the rest. And so we're going to be moving billions of dollars of capital into regenerative agricultural systems and systems thinking through that impact fund in the coming years. And so that's an exciting one to follow. That's going to be emerging just in the next 60 days or so here. We have an energy company that we've launched that is working on, we've been building for the last 5 years, 40-foot mitochondria that digests plastic and other farm waste into biodiesel. And so it's just like a lot of exciting stuff going on. And so stay tuned at Zach Bush MD, and we'll keep all the cool news coming at you. And we can't wait to see how this grows, because we think that there's an opportunity for change the way that businesses, even in their successful innovations, grow. Imagine instead of a bunch of VC funds rushing in to scale to a monolithic proportion some new innovation, so the Uber of the world. And so we took one idea and we scaled it globally. And the problem with that is that when you try to scale an innovation that works great in Southern California to Hawaii or rural indigenous communities in Southern Asia, is you destroy economies and ecosystems that have existed and slowly developed for thousands of years. So monolithic scaling of companies is an old and broken paradigm that is destroying the planet. And so in our innovations, as we start to think about our web platform or energy company or whatever it is, we're excited for a new concept of when your innovation happens, instead of trying to scale that monolithically, what if you mimic the fungi, not this time in the mycelium, but actually in the spores? And so the way in which fungi travel over grand distances, the whole globe, is through these tiny little spores that are like viruses. They carry they're not living, but they're little packets of genetic information that go out to replicate that organism on a grand scale. What if companies came to realize that instead of scaling to some multi-billion-dollar status, the innovative team that created that innovation becomes a seed and a stakeholder in 42 other companies that are seeded in different socioeconomic environments that can then inform that innovation with local culture, local religion, local ecosystems. So that new company becomes resilient and doesn't disrupt existing economies in the developing world or in the developed world or different ecosystems that can't handle the plow as it does in the Midwest and things like this. So we're very excited that the Impact Fund is going to show the way for the future of capital investment to be done in a biologic fashion rather than a monolithic capitalistic fashion.
Oh, that's just, and I don't know if you saw some of these comments. I mean, just thank you. Some people said you give me hope for the future. You give me hope for our world, and like I share the same sentiment. I mean, you guys, before I move on to another question or a topic, I would say write down. It's already pinned. Zach Bush, MD. That's Dr. Zach's Instagram handle. Go there, and you can go to everywhere on his link in his profile that goes to his website. You can go sign up for all these. Stay informed and just be a part of this movement and support what they're doing, because it's going to save all of us. It's going to save our planet and our world and humanity. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we still have so many more questions, but I just wanted to make sure I pointed out that to everyone. Go write it down. Make sure you follow. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. And Dr. Zach, for people who were this information, just it might be a lot to process, and some people really have a hard time understanding the relationship between the sun and the soil and our bodies and our health and the health of our planet. Is there any way that you can just kind of really simplify that so that someone can walk away from this and then know what they can do starting today, to contribute to this process, this connection?
Yeah. I'm about to blow your mind. This is really cool stuff.
I love it. That's part.
All right. So this blows my mind every time I get to voice any perspective on it at all. And before I dive into that, I do want to recognize that what just got said in the last few minutes is going to make it could have sounded like, oh, Zach and his team are super brilliant and they're making all these things. But the call that I just came off of with one of my creative think tanks that I'm just a small part of it, beautiful people in this group of creatives, and we're working on telling the story of humanity, telling the story of where we are and where we're going as humans. And in that, we had a dialogue today about the difference between the theater of politics that's happening today with Breonna Taylor and this whole charade that's happening, and the acting that goes into politics today, and this sad kind of tragic thing that always emerges is this kind of falsehood that's kind of baked into even the altruistic seeming things. And there's a real sadness there. But on the flip side, when you see something really incredible, like you hear what you just had the past few minutes, there's an opportunity for us to damn the politician and then raise the thought leader, whoever you're looking at, to some sort of glorified state. The discussion we just had, I think, is so poignant in that we need to realize that it's the audience that creates the experience. It's the audience that's actually creating the theater. in and of itself. And so if I say something that's inspiring, if I say something that gives you hope, I want you all to realize that that is not Zach. That is not me as an individual. That is a human being willing to step into the resonance of you as an audience, of you of humanity. And all I'm doing is speaking for the trees. All I'm doing is speaking for humanity. And humanity created these solutions because humanity and the planet need these solutions. And so I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. I don't see myself as an innovator. I see myself as a pipeline of information that's flowing out of Mother Nature and humanity itself. And that's it. And so I want to do that because there's a tendency to say, oh, Zach's so smart or things like that. I am not very smart, people. Like I wake up in the morning and I have to go look around for my toothbrush every day, and I am looking for my pants, and I have to put my shorts on, and I have to, I feel like an idiot every time I go into a social setting. The scariest thing that I ever do is walk into a bar or restaurant without an agenda. I don't know how to interact socially without an agenda, and so I get stressed out by something like that. I've never been cool in my life because I'm so stressed by that social. For me, it feels like pressure. For others, I can see the ease of conversation and everything. So I'm not smart. I'm hardly human. I'm suffering through my days just as any of you might be. If I am functional right now, if I am achieving anything, it is to let go of self through the confidence that I am beautiful, that I am here on purpose, and I am real. And if I am real, then I can be witness to beauty. And if I can be witness to beauty, I can probably play with beauty. And if I can play with beauty, I can probably create something with Mother Nature and with my fellow humans. And we can together express something extraordinary.
Yes.
But we can't really do it until we've let go of the sense of self that the world has put on us, and let go of the identities of I am a dad, I am a husband, I am an employer, I'm a doctor, I'm whatever it is. I have to let go of all of that every day to do my highest calling. And I just have to be me. And at that I am state, then all of this stuff starts to flow in your life. And so I hope that you start to realize that every time in the last few minutes you say, Zach is blowing my mind, I want you to realize you are blowing your mind. You're blowing your mind because you can even conceive of the architecture of what we just described, the internet, the Facebooks, the banking system, the economy, the politics. You have enough wherewithal to hold all of that in your reality so that you can see a solution as it comes towards you. That is miraculous. And so you are an agent of change in your witness to other humans and their message. And so you are that which is to be celebrated. And we are, as humanity, expressing something of nature that is to be celebrated. I don't even remember the next question I was supposed to answer, but I wanted to point that out in that, I'm just I want you all to feel a part of this. You are the origin story.
That was so beautiful. I'm feeling just emotional about that. I really am. And I appreciate that so much. And I know that, look at all these messages and comments, and it's just that reminder, and it's so very much at the core of what I share with my community on a regular basis, is that we are all connected and we are all one. And I love that you reminded us, and it's what I remind myself every day as well, just that I am, and that in itself, that's everything, and we are. So thank you so much for interjecting with that, because that was beautiful, and I know that it resonated with all these people because we are all together, we are all one. So I just love that, and I remember what my question was now.
Oh, good.
So definitely go back to that. And by the way, I'm an introvert too. I'm there, and you know what we are? We're ambiverts. That's where we're introverts, but we can, if we have the agenda, we can step up and go and do the thing, but really very happy at home and with our family and our dogs. And so I'm the same way. I totally get it.
I appreciate that commiserate.
Yeah. So we were talking about just for people, because I know there's so many people there's so many people out there, this will get shared, but just even right now, there's so many people on that they want to know what they can do next. They they can go on the website, they can sign up, they can support and donate and participate. But there is people, I think, need to really connect to the soil and the earth and how, how as you said before, the biophonetics, of the earth and our bodies and how we're going to heal all together, starting from the sun down to the soil with plants.
Okay. I remember now. I love it. All right, I was going to blow your mind. That's what I was going to do next.
Yes! I mean, you've been doing that the whole time, but let's just go again.
Oh, no. This is just such an extraordinary reality that we live in. And so to tell that story, we have to actually be able to do a thought experiment where we close our eyes for a moment, wherever you are in the world. Close your eyes and let's picture, feel yourself first. Feel where your feet are. Feel the pressure on your feet or in your butt from gravity holding you into the surface of the earth here. Acknowledge your discomfort if you have some pain somewhere or something like that. And then I want you to move out of that space of kind of the heaviness of your body and move just like, picture yourself hovering 30 feet above your body and looking down at where you're at. Maybe you're in a house, maybe you're in a field, maybe you're in a park, maybe you're on a walk. Just look down at yourself and you can see yourself there at the top of your head and the environment you're in. And then I want you to start zooming out. And so let's zoom out. Now you can suddenly see the city and you see the lights of the city and you're zooming back out further. And now you can start to see the continent and then the oceans. And then you can see the entire vague blue line as it starts to take shape on your right and left as you start to reach that event horizon of the atmosphere into suddenly black space that you're floating in. And there's utter silence in that space. And you're still backing up further. And now you can see the globe for its whole self, this blue aura of light energy on the surface of the planet. And this is where we start the story of soil. You are right now floating in pure vacuum space, which means there is nothing there, right? And so to be there is to be disrupting the space that's in that outer space environment. And it is cold. You're at minus a couple hundred degrees, and it is silent. There's no ability for sound to happen because there is no matter for the sound wave to travel through. So there's just complete silence, and it's utterly cold. So much so that if it got any colder, all vibration of atomic structure would stop. And so we are in this frozen silence, and through that space, through that silent, cold space, is an extraordinary amount of energy flowing. And it's flowing in the form of an electromagnetic field that's emanating out of light energy that's being pulsed out into the universe by billions of suns. In our galaxy alone, there's 1 billion suns. And then there's 1 billion galaxies. And so billions and billions of suns, in fact, billions of suns and billions of galaxies are emanating an electromagnetic field out into the utter blackness of space. And it doesn't warm it, and it doesn't create any noise. And so all of this energy of all of the suns creates no warmth. Even our own sun does not warm the space between itself and Mother Earth. That's bizarre. There is no warmth to sunlight until it touches the atmosphere. To experience a waveform, you have to be in a solid particle state. And the particle state is what we call in quantum physics a very momentary event. And so every millionth of a second, every wave has the opportunity on planet Earth to be a particle and to demonstrate some sort of physical solid property to it. And then it's gone a millionth of a second later and has to reappear in another iteration a millionth of a second later. And so in the particle state, in the solid state of Mother Earth, we experience warmth from our sun. And all of the other electromagnetic field energy traveling in from the universe actually hits the surface of our atmosphere and creates the northern lights. And so that incredible blues and pinks and oranges and sherberts that happen in the sky of the northern hemisphere is literally the visual experience of watching billions of stars pour their energy onto our planet. And it sits there and floats around the surface of the planet and is transferred. This huge electromagnetic potential is transferred to the surface of the planet through 100,000 lightning strikes every hour on the surface of the planet. And so the lightning is charging, literally electrically charging, just like recharging a battery, planet Earth, hovering just a nanometer above the level of soil or above the level of anything solid, a rock, a plant, everything else, hovering a nanometer above that, a millionth of a little meter above that, is this blanket of electricity. And so the Earth is animated by a charged force from all of the stars in the universe. And the only way in which we can, as biologic entities, whether we are bacteria or a human or anything in between, the only way in which we can experience that electrical charge is either through direct touch, bare feet on the ground. When was the last time you did that? Or through the consumption of food. And to have that electrical energy enter the food, we need the microbiome. But we need the microbiome to do something really cool first, which is to breathe. When we have active soil on the planet, it breathes in electrical energy in the form of salts. So tiny little minerals and molecules within the atmosphere will pick up electrical energy from that blanket of electrons from the solar energy of the universe. And we then take that electrical energy and we put it into a bacteria that will then start to break down those nutrients, and they will liberate energy from that. And they will also build energetic things. And so one of the things that will be built by the cooperative relationship between the bacteria and the root system of a plant is carbohydrates. And so the carbohydrates or the fat within the plant, all of the oils in the plant, etc., those carbohydrates and fats are the actual construction of carbons plugged onto each other to create large carbon chains. And from that carbon chain now that's been produced by bacteria and plant, we then consume, and the bacteria start to break it back down. So we take a carbohydrate or a fat, we start to break it down into its simple elements, and then we put it into the bloodstream. And still, the human can have no access to the electrical energy. Instead, it has to be transited inside of a human cell to a tiny little bacteria called a mitochondria, which is a little archaea that absorbed a methane-producing bacteria. So it's kind of like a bacteria inside of a bacteria that lives inside of our cells and reproduces there. Each human cell has, as many as 2,000 mitochondria within it. So we have these whole populations of mitochondria living inside of each of our cells, and they're living organisms, they're little bacteria. And they then have to take the carbohydrate or the fat, and they, in one step, turn both fat and sugar into the exact same molecule, which is acyl-CoA. And then they take it a second step into acetyl-CoA and then put it through something called the Krebs cycle that actually starts to break the carbon open so that electrons can pour out of the carbon salts that are put into our bodies in the forms of sugars or fat. And then suddenly we liberate inside of our cells electromagnetic field energy from stars in the universe around us. That's what food is. Food is a delivery system for star energy into your body, which is pretty far out.
Wow, my hands don't say blanc, expanded. That was just my expansion. Wow. And I really, I loved how you gave us that visual. And when you're going back in, it's mind-blowing for some people. What a brain God's gift to this man. Yes, I would say yes. Thank you for that explanation. I'm going to have to listen to it again myself on my own replay shortly after this. But that's for those of you who have asked, that's how the sun and the soil and this energy is all connected. And this is why it's so important for us to take care of our soil, because we're putting that energy back into our bodies through food. And that's why the quality of our food is so important. And, there's so much that there's questions about biosequestration. There's questions about, there's some basic questions. You want to know if you like fermented foods.
I love fermented foods.
Yes.
It's one of the coolest things. Me and the rest of the world got so excited about sourdough the last 6 months, and it's a great example of the magic of fermentation. So we went from California being the biggest gluten-sensitive state in the world to the primary producer of sourdough on the planet in all of human history. And so somehow coronavirus cured gluten sensitivity, which was amazing. But what happened is we started to ferment the process of water and flour. And when you create fermentation, the microbes within the air, primarily the yeast and the little fungal organisms, will start to create different relationships between those carbohydrates and those carbon materials to release energy differently. And so somebody who's gluten sensitive can find themselves eating in the streets of Paris with no problem. They're eating croissants and everything else. And then they come back to the United States and it's like 2 days of brain fog off of one piece of bread.
Yeah.
What's happening there is that we have, through artificial chemical injection of the wheat, we started spraying our wheat in the United States with glyphosate in 1992 and every year more. And so before corn and soybean, we were spraying wheat, and we created gluten sensitivity at that moment. And our lab has been working very specifically on the exact mechanism of how glyphosate creates gluten sensitivity, leaky gut, and all of that over the last 7 years. And you read our articles. If you jump on Zach Bush MD and into the ION science and all that, you'll find all those articles and white papers and all that. But the interesting thing that we learned from fermentation is that the microorganisms are always there to change our relationship with the energy that I just described a few minutes ago. So the more that you put more bacteria and fungi between you and your food, the more likely you're going to liberate energy from it. And the less bacteria and fungi you have between you and your food, the more likely you're going to be injured by that food. And the best example of this is any processed food. Yeah. When you take the fiber out of a food and juicing can do this to people. I've seen juicing hurt people really badly because they're taking so much fiber out and drinking pure carbohydrate without the fiber, which is the antidote to the sugar. They can really do bad things to their metabolism and start gaining weight, and they get fatigue, and all kinds of bad things can happen with chronic juicing. So as soon as you process anything and disrupt its original form, you are losing the ability for a diverse microorganism population to take care of that for you and liberate energy from it, and it's more likely to become an energy sink rather than an energy gift. And so processed food at its nutshell is a disaster because it eliminates the need for bacteria and fungi between you and the food.
Yeah.
Fermentation is an awesome solution. So you do sauerkraut, you do sour Reuben, you do all this stuff, and it puts microbes in the digestive process weeks before you ever eat that cabbage. Right? So what used to be a carbohydrate that we would describe as cabbage is now this extraordinary array of small carbon metabolites that can now be utilized as medicine in far different ways. And so we can manufacture alkaloids, which are the medicines within our food, in different ways. We access alkaloids differently if the microbial digestion has been there. In the same way, we want our gut to be in a constant availability for both aerobic and fermentation to be occurring. And, cows are an example of a total fermentation process. And so the rumen gut does far more fermentation than the human gut or the dog or the chicken does. And so the rumen gut is much different, doesn't have a stomach, has 4 pouches that do this long-term fermentation process. And for that, the cow is gifted with nutrients at a really incredible level. And vitamin B12 is a good example. Everybody thinks that B12 comes from meat. Meat doesn't make any B12. A cow cell has never made B12 ever.
Yeah.
What makes the B12 is the bacteria in the pouch of the cow that is liberating all this nutrient. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you maximize your relationship to the vegetable kingdom through fermentation, you're experiencing that B12 vitamin B whole complex burst every time you eat sauerkraut that you could not have gotten from the cabbage because there was no fermentation to begin that journey. And so fermentation is you becoming more accessible to nature and nature becoming more accessible to you.
Oh, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. You becoming more accessible to nature and nature becoming more accessible to you. Dr. Zach, I think we might get kicked off in just a minute or two here by Instagram because we're coming up to the hour. I don't know if you have any more time. If you do, we can jump back on. If not, I want to remind everyone again, Zach Bush MD at the very bottom here. That's his Instagram account. This is something that everyone needs this. Everybody. So we talked about this at the very beginning. You can find this on his website. This is what I use every single day. I have a lot of people saying, no, please don't get off. So what is your schedule? Can we go a couple more minutes? If you have something after this, we can do a part 2 another time. But this is
I do have something else coming up in 4 minutes, but I got 4 minutes for you. So.
Okay, great. So we'll just stay on until, because I jumped on a little bit early. We'll just stay on until Instagram takes us off. But I just want to at least get a chance to say thank you before we all jump off. I mean, this has been just profound and amazing, and I'm so grateful. And I know that everyone on here is so grateful. We do have more questions, and there's so many. I'm sorry I can't get to all of them. we would like to. Oh, I do have a question. I'm curious about the name of your company, Seraphic. Where does that come from? It's kind of like off the beaten path of different questions, but I personally was very curious. So
that's cool. I almost never get asked that. So seraphic as a word means befitting of the seraphim, and the seraphim are four creatures described in a number of different forms of scriptures, ancient scriptures, and the seraphim were the four angelic-like creatures that carried out the will of God, and the meaning of befitting of the seraphim seemed perfect for my desire to carry out and be the hands of a creative universe and a creative God as we would see it. And the word God has become nebulous to me in the sense that it describes the highest intelligence within the universe, and it is the architect of life itself. And we are an expression of it, and we can become the hands of it. Just as we described, the sun doesn't warm any space between itself and Mother Earth. The sun warms us when we become solid. And so to be the hands of an invisible force of intention for life is to be human. And so Seraphic, I think, in a nutshell, is my effort towards a description of my experience of being human, and to be asked into this hallowed relationship with an intention for life, and to be the hands of that.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad I asked you that question. I think a bunch of people got kicked out because my messages did kind of, I have like a lot of the viewers have my text number, and so it's just like, where'd you go? So I think a bunch of people got kicked out, but at least I have this, recorded, and we can share that as a reason for how you came up with the name. That was just so beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Zach. Before I lose you, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and everything that you're doing for our world. And I know that we're all in this together. So thank you for teaching us and sharing with us. The name of the supplement is ION Gut Health ION BIOME. Can you see that? And if you just go to Dr. Zach's account, you'll find everything. It's just a wealth of information. Sign up for everything. Get ready for this platform because we've got to share it with the world. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Dr. Zach.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you to the audience for creating this moment together. Appreciate you all.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, bye.